Welcome everyone to this beautiful meeting. For us, for me in Europe, it's a little late. For Veda, it's very early morning, and so we're all on different timelines. But I'm so glad there's so many of you here. Just a little bit of background information. This webinar is hosted by Advaya. We're a learning platform offering courses about ecology, spirituality, mysticism, and so much more. And one of the core principles that we have is to bring people together to foster a relational worldview, which, we believe is such a powerful way and powerful and tender force is how I call it, to bring in change. And this webinar is in celebration of our upcoming course, Wisdoms of Water, an exploration of mythology, memory, and freedom, which is curated and hosted by me with a faculty of 12 guest teachers, including Bayo Komolafe, Astrida Neymanis, Vandana Shiva, and Veda Austin, who's here with us today. So yay. And during the research for this course, I realized that all the people I encountered who were working on water, they did it all with such care, respect, and reverence towards water as an element. The course is called Wisdoms with an extra S because it looks at water from many different perspectives. So mythology in the Mediterranean, it looks at water worshipping of serpent beings in ancient times, water activism, indigenous knowledge, and water as consciousness, which is something that we're going to touch on today because it's Veda's amazing work. The course starts on the 28th and it runs for 6 weeks, 6 modules. And you can either participate live, which is really nice if you want to interact, or you can find a recording in your own time and watch it on demand. Whoever joins the course will also receive Veda's exclusive guide, which is the 3 stages of freezing. And it's a 25-page guide known as the Collective Molecular Photography. And it offers a practical step-by-step approach to her famous freezing technique, which she'll explain in the course and we'll touch upon today a little bit. And without further ado, I'm so honored, Veda, to have you here. Your work on water for me is rooted in such deep reverence and care for water. And, just yesterday we had this conversation and I was just like, I just wanted to listen to your stories all day. And I was in awe of your knowledge. I want to formally introduce you with a good bio. So Veda's a water researcher, public speaker, mother, artist, and author. She's dedicated her last decade to observing and photographing the life of water. She believes that water is fluid intelligence, observing itself through every living organism on the planet and the universe. Her primary area of focus is photographing water in its state of creation, the space between liquid and ice. And it's through this remarkable crystallographic photos that water reveals itself, its awareness of not only creation, but thought and intention through imagery. You bring a message of hope and joy from the very source of life itself. And she says, water is transparent. It knows no color, creed, or religion. Water does not judge. It does not label. It will enter the body of an ant as easily as it will enter the body of a king or a homeless person or a tree or a dragonfly. Water is our constant companion from the moment we're conceived. It's always with us. Even upon death, it is water that evaporates from the physical rising upwards to the heavens. So thank you so much for being here. I'd love to start by asking you, and if you want to introduce yourself a little bit more, however you want, but I want to know how this all began and if there was a particularly memorable moment or experience in your life that had an impact on you and kind of began this journey for you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I've seen so many people from all around the world saying where they're from, and I saw some people were in Lisbon, and so I'm looking forward to being in Lisbon later on this year at the annual water conference. So it's always a difficult question, when people say when was the most memorable kind of time where you connected with water, because I have such an interest in the primordial waters, the waters of the womb. I've always thought that ancestral information is shared through the amniotic fluid, but we can kind of get into that a little later. Many years ago now, over 25 years ago, and I know some people may have heard this story, but I know that many haven't. I was in a really horrendous car accident. We went under a 7-ton truck, rolled twice, and the driver died immediately. And to date, it is still considered one of the worst accidents in New Zealand where someone survived. And over the course of 20 years from the date that happened, I'd had 8 surgeries, mostly for bowel surgery because I had internal bleeding where the seat belt crushed my organs and shattered my collarbone. I'd also had stage 4 endometriosis on top of that, so I'd had surgery for that as well. So on my 8th surgery going in for a bowel resection, my 3rd one, I woke up surrounded by doctors, and they were hovering over me saying, "Well, you didn't recover very well, and you have showers of blood clots in your lungs." And I was shocked. I was in my early 20s. I was outside of the car accident, young, fit, healthy, well. So it really shocked me that had happened. And they put it down to so much anesthetic and being under for so long. But they couldn't 100% tell me that was the reason, which was very frustrating. And so they wanted me to be on warfarin, which is a blood thinner, for potentially the rest of my life. And they said if I didn't do it, I would die. So I took warfarin for about 4 months. And then I had a chest x-ray and it was clear. And I said to the doctor, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be on warfarin anymore. My chest is clear. I know my body can heal because 3 doctors had already told me that I could never have children based on the amount of surgery and damage that had happened to my internal organs. So I'd already had a child for every doctor that told me I couldn't. So I knew that my body could do things on its own. I have a tendency to put, and this isn't against doctors, because when you are in a car accident, they do such a fantastic job. But I was able to put what they had said about my future body on the shelf. And that was very helpful for me. So everybody has to make their own choices. This was mine. It's not recommending people just get off warfarin, or it has to be your own decision. And I had weighed it up. And I went on this health journey. And I wanted to stay as healthy as I could possibly stay. And so I ended up speaking to a friend of mine who is a medical doctor and also practices Ayurvedic medicine. And he said, look, off the record, if you can find a natural, emphasis on natural, not ionized, not kind of a machine-made water, he said, if you can find a natural source of alkaline water, that might help to get your body back into balance. He went into the details, but I really don't have time to get into all of it. So I thought, wow, then water, like just drinking water, that's got to be easy. And in New Zealand, most of our spring waters are alkaline, and so it's really not very difficult to find. So I put myself on 2-week trials. By this time, I had a wellness centre that I was running, and I'd moved from Christchurch after the earthquakes up to Auckland. And I was trialing myself very, very strictly. I hadn't changed my diet. I didn't change my makeup. I was, or skincare or any of these things. I was living life as I normally would, but the only thing I did different was drink this alkaline water. So over a period of time, I didn't notice much except feeling hydrated. That's where you have more mental clarity, you're not feeling kind of drowsy, you have more energy, but nothing obvious happened. And how do you know? Because it's all happening inside of you, outside of how you feel. So there's a lady that came to me and she said, I know this old guy. He has his own private water source. It's a spring and it is coming up out of the ground at 9.9 pH, or power or potential of hydrogen, which is a very high pH naturally. And he said he's only giving it to cancer patients and they're having amazing results, and maybe you'd like to try. So I spoke to him. He gave me a month's worth of water to drink. And I would drink a litre in the morning, an hour before eating, and a litre at night, an hour after dinner. And that was all I drank. I treated all of it like a medicine water. You shouldn't drink alkaline water with food. That doesn't make sense. Your body is trying to process all of the food and make acid to kind of deconstruct the food, if you will. And so then drinking alkaline water, it just kind of defeats the purpose. It's good to have space between. So on day 3, I noticed a really big change and something so many people don't like talking about, which is bowel motions. So many people, and I am shocked when I hear the statistics on this, but so many people are literally like sitting on the toilet trying to push out a pebble for an hour and grossly dehydrated. And it is theorized that nearly 97% of people in the world are actually dehydrated. And just mild little things like just a headache can mean that you have dehydration. And it's often not so much about the quantity of water as it is about quality of water. And so I noticed a positive change, and after so much bowel surgery, that meant something to me. And I thought, well, something's changing. On day 10, I noticed something really noticeable. And I had all these bumps coming up along my arm and jaw that were really painful. And I knew my body was purging, but I didn't know exactly what it was purging. So there was one bump that just was super angry, and when I would touch it, it felt sharp. And so, as gross as this sounds, I ended up getting some tweezers, and I picked something out of my arm, and it was a little bit of green glass. And between day 10 and 12, I had ended up picking 27 pieces of green glass out of my arm and jaw. And that had been embedded in my body for over 20 years because the man who died in the car accident owned a nightclub. And in the back of the car were crates of Steinlager beer. That's it's a lager in a green glass bottle. And when the car rolled, this side got more green glass and this side got more windscreen. And I thought, how on earth can just drinking this water purge me like this? And then I thought, well, maybe it's just me. Maybe, I want to see, will this happen or anything amazing happen to other people? So because I had a wellness center, I also had plenty of volunteers. And outside of that, I went to my dad, who's kind of a big Maori guy. And he's always wanted to lose weight. And so he's like, oh, I said, well, can you try the water and see if it helps you with anything? And so my dad is kind of a well-known personality in New Zealand. His name is Bill Hohepa. He's like this famous Maori fisherman. And so he's had all kinds of fish injuries, if you will. And so when he's been out fishing, he, a long time ago, he had a fish spine thing go between his knuckles, and he thought he'd got it all out. But when he started drinking the water again around the day 10 mark, he started having this big bulge coming out between his knuckles and this bit of what looked like fossilized fin because the spike came out. So the bit that he'd missed pushed its way out between his knuckles. Then I thought that was really, really interesting. But with the wellness center people, I had very, very healthy people to very, very unwell people. The very, very healthy athletes found that incremental little bit of energy that they were looking for. And one case was a man who'd stage 4 cancer, and he lived in Coromandel, and he fasted only on this water for, like I said, for 27 days, not eating any food, only drinking. And he had wanted to try a water fast before he went into the realm of chemo. And whilst he still had the energy to do it, and he was doing the internal work, I mean, that's really important. But halfway through his 27-day water fast, it had to be in constant contact with his doctors, and they found his tumor had reduced by half. And 3 weeks after the fast, they called it a miraculous, like spontaneous healing. And he is still cancer-free. And during the 2 years, there were a couple of other cancer patients that did water fasts longer than 12 days, but not as long as 27, that also had remarkable healings. Am I saying it's the water? Well, I think it's the person. I think the water helped, but a lot of people feel like they look to water to heal them, but they are a body of water. So is it that you need to find the best water in the world and that's just automatically going to heal you? Or do you have something to do with that equation? I think there are healing waters around the world, and I think you are instrumental as to the way in which that water is received. You are the welcoming committee, so you have a lot more to do with your own healing than, well, you have everything to do with your own healing. No pill, no medicine, no external thing is going to heal you. It is you that is healing you, inspired by that sort of signature pattern of that thing. So this water had a very high vibration, and this man who did this long water fast saw this water as an ancestor. He had a connection with water that was quite spiritual, and invited that ancestor into his body to help him heal himself, to give him guidance. So it was a very unique relationship that he had with water. So after seeing all of these things happen, and everybody's eyesight improved. So our eye lens is 99% highly ordered, structured water. We literally see the entire world through the lens of water, but we never think about it. Sometimes, you can see how jelly-like the eye lens is. Some people have some issues with their eye lens, and it almost like it's got like a little wrinkle inside of it, and that shows its kind of plasma state, this very unique state. And so this, the eye lens, given that it's such a huge percentage of this highly ordered, what we call structured crystalline water, which is actually not H2O, it's H3O2. It has an extra hydrogen and oxygen atom. It is able to absorb more light, which is a big factor. It has negative charge, which means it's healthy. All cells in the body are negatively charged. If you have something like a serious disease, your cells start to become more positively charged, and that's Dr. Jerry Pollack, who's a friend of mine, believes that that's because of the special water in your cells. It is usually just slightly alkaline, or in the alkaline range, and it has an ordered molecular structure, a lattice-like ordered molecular structure. So I found that really interesting. One lady had to change the prescription on her glasses because her eyes were improving so much.
Mm.
And so all of this, anyway, led me to question, why is this water special? So I go straight to an analysis and go, okay, well, here's this amount of bicarb, this amount of lime, and these are the factors to make the water naturally alkaline. It has silica, yes, it has this, and blah, blah. And I started to realize, okay, I'm looking at this analysis, but what is it telling me really about the water outside of what water holds? So I'm saying, if all I'm seeing is what water is holding, what do I know about the water? And then you get to the question of what is water. And a scientist would say, well, it's, H2O. But someone much more perhaps different thinking or deeper thought might say, and did say to me, that the water is two hydrogens which are feminine in the mode of levity, and the large oxygen is masculine and it's in the mode of gravity, and together they create balance and liquid water on Earth. And I think it's also very important to understand that not only is water hydrogen and oxygen, that's only according to one particular scientist that has written some work on this. The oxygen and the two hydrogens are just the only matter part of water. There's one part matter and something like 99% photons, which is light. So water is a container of light. And it is the light that is the part, I think, that is the spirit of water, a condensed light. Now, we'll get into that later in the conversation I'll have down the line in a few weeks or so. So I started learning more and more about different people's work and studies on water, and started to come into my own way of thinking too. And of course, I came across Masaru Emoto's work and his book. And although he wasn't embraced by the scientific community, because he never he always shared that he was choosing the best photos to represent what he was trying to say. But it's not very scientific according to science. But what he did do was open the door, really, for people to see themselves as bodies of water that is sensitive to thoughts, to sounds, to their environment, to music, to emotion. In an extremely visual way. Emoto became very, very famous off about 8 contrasting photos. And this really does say that pictures speak 1,000 words. Now, he was flash freezing water and looking down a microscope and taking photos, and after exposing it to what we might term as a positive or a negative, like the word love and the word hate. And I have seen that humans love to see the best and the worst of things. Whenever I share a contrasting photo, there's like so many views, but there's so much in between. And I'm going to tell a little story after this about what my son said about seeing the contrasting photos of music in Emoto's book. But he was a pioneer in that he was sharing these visuals that people could identify with. More than this, than Emoto, though, for me personally, it was a man by the name of Laurent Costa. And Laurent Costa is a French microscopic photographer using a similar technique to Emoto, but rather than experiment on water, he considered water to be his spiritual teacher, much like I do, I guess, now. And rather than trying to get water to do what he wanted to get to know water. And so sometimes he couldn't help it, and he would smile at the water prior to freezing. And when he looked down the microscope, he was getting smiley faces in the ice. He was getting hearts. He was getting cats. He was getting fish, which sounds so random and crazy, but they were all relative to things that had happened to him in the day. And he also got geometries like Emoto. Now, as an artist, like I worked professionally as an oil painter for many years. I'm a researcher. We're all rather multifaceted, but I see the world very in an artistic way. So to see art in ice that was extremely recognizable, it made me think, well, this is actually a very sophisticated form of communication. Art is if we go back to cave paintings, the people were able to express what they saw and what they felt in their environment through art. And that left an impression for us to know about them and what they were thinking, feeling, and seeing. Art is a very human thing as well, that we are able to take what we think and draw it in our own way. So this sophistication really intrigued me. And then I learnt about a man by the name of Thomas Hieronymus. And this is a very, very long-winded way of telling you about how I got into maybe the longest version ever. But Thomas Hieronymus was a radionic engineer. And the more I find out about him, the more interesting he gets. He was fascinating. Anyway, he went into a Parisian meat market on an extremely cold and frosty day, and he observed that the freshly placed organs of an animal seemed to be somehow affecting the frost on the glass behind where they were placed. For example, the frost would freeze into the shape of a liver organ above a liver organ, and so on and so forth. And his hypothesis was there seemed to be some kind of life force energy still emanating out of these organs, even though they were no longer attached to an animal. And he put that down to there being water in the blood. And I can say that water is always in communications with itself in all these different stages. And each organ has something called a sonic signature. And a sonic signature is like a cymatic imprint for form and function of that organ. And so the water in the blood was sharing the information of that, to the water in the air. And the water in the air, as it hit the glass, took on the form of the information. And what was super cool for me was that he was seeing that with his naked eye. And everyone else had been using a microscope. And 10 years ago, I didn't have a microscope. I wasn't working microscopically. And so I thought, well, the secret seems to be in the freezing, where the unseen becomes seen. So why don't I take a little bit of all the things I've just learned, get my glass petri dish, because I was working on another project for some people, and I'm going to put some of the water that helped heal me in it, and I'm going to project a thought, and I'm going to put it into my freezer, and I'm going to see what happens. I had nothing to lose. I was just curious if this was possible or if anything would happen. And so I'm holding my dish, and over the many years now, I've used every different type of water you can imagine, or water's worked with me. And so there was a little bit of fluff floating around in the water. So I was like, oh my God. So I put my hand in to take out the fluff, thinking, oh, I wonder if my hand will have any impact on the water's quote unquote memory, because I didn't know if that was a real thing. And I thought, well, that thought will do. So I immediately put it into the freezer with the peas and broccoli and everything else. It's my normal freezer. And I forgot about it. And this was, gosh, when I used to freeze water solid, of which I have not done in 9 years. And I'll be teaching my technique in the next thing we do.
Class, yeah.
The class. And it's very simple, but there are some things you need to know. So, but in the beginning, I froze this water, and a few hours later I came back, I held it up to the light, and I took my very first photo of one of now over 50,000 photos of water responding in an incredibly intelligent way. The photo that I took was of, it looked just like a hand, an X-ray of a hand. I inherited my mother's crooked fingers, especially these two on this hand, and they're crooked. And the hand had crooked fingers on the same fingers. And so this blew me away. Well, first I'm seeing a hand. I showed my son, I said, he was young and just tells it like it is. And I said, hey, Rama, what does this look like to you? I just showed him the picture on my phone. He didn't know what I took the picture of. He said, oh, it looks like a creepy X-ray hand, Mum. And I'm like, it really does. And then I went to the beach and I thought, well, if any water is going to be naturally informed, it would be the sea, the ocean. And I lived close to the beach. So I froze a very thin layer of seawater, and seawater freezes differently than fresh water. So when I show you the photo, it looks a little feathery. But I was waiting outside the freezer thinking, if I see anything relative to the ocean in here, then maybe this isn't random. Because this was like a big deal for me when I first saw this. Because I thought, if this does it again, what does this mean? And when I took the photo, there was a very clear fish with fins and gills and a perfectly round eye and the shape of the
Wow.
fish. And then my freezer became my most used household appliance. That, and then I started learning more and more about the fourth phase of water. And then I learned my technique a year later, and that was a quantum leap from freezing water solid to now. And I look back at my work in the beginning and I'm amazed. Now that I know how water freezes and the stages that it takes, I'm amazed that I got the kind of imagery that I did. Because now it's such a thin layer of ice and it's so three-dimensional and there's so much light can come through that you can get all the details. But the iconic photos I took, and I'd love to share them with you if you'd like.
Yeah, of course. I I yesterday I was looking at all your videos and photos and I was wondering if you have like a special gigantic freezer in your house where you do all these. I was imagining. Um, I mean, thank you for sharing that. I wanted to know because for me, when I hear your stories, is that there's obviously such a huge spiritual dimension to this to all this work and what I also love about how you approach it is that you're always curious. To this day, you say you're still baffled whenever you try something. And I think that humility and that reverence are so beautiful to look at, even if you've been doing this for a long, long time. And I wanted to know for you the connection between water and spirituality, because you said before water has become like your spiritual guide or leader or I don't know. Um, if you want to maybe talk about that a little bit, I'd love to know a bit more.
In my father is native New Zealand Maori, and many Indigenous cultures have a deep relationship with water that is unique. And my very, very dear friend, and I've sent so many prayers for his healing, Kalani Souza, he's actually a Hawaiian elder. And he's always said that water is not a resource, it's a relative. And that would mean that anything that has water in it is related to us. And I would say that that's very likely a truth. We, when I go into schools and I teach a mix of science and art projects with children, I always ask a question after talking about water and all of this. And I said, well, if your skin was invisible and your organs were see-through, what would you look like? And they always come back with rivers and tributaries and streams and waterfalls. And one boy said he'd look like a brain-shaped cloud with electrical rain shining down in the shape of a person. And when we take away the skin, what we see is that we are fluid intelligence. And that's why we're like one cut away from leaking, one emotion away from leaking, one exercise away from leaking, all these different things away from leaking. But there is a very special word in the Maori language, which is wairua, and it means spirit. And there are multiple different aspects of that word and that deeper meaning. But one of them, you can just look at the translations in English, and it means two waters, the physical and spiritual waters. So what are the physical waters? I think we have some idea. We think we have an idea. I think I sometimes have no idea. The more I study, the more I realize there is so much. And within that muchness is a simplicity. And the simplicity, I think, is where you found a spiritual truth. Where when you study one thing with water, when I study spirit, when I study this or that or the other thing, everything starts to make more sense. It doesn't get more confusing. But this spiritual water, I think, is in relationship to the gaseous stage or an ether. And there are various thoughts on this. But I'd bring it back to an Indigenous woman who said that she could speak to bees. That might seem random, but we'll go there anyway because it made a lot of sense to me after she explained it. And she said that she would watch their hives for really long periods of time. And a bee somehow came out and communicated to her on behalf of the hive and said, we don't mind you watching our hive, but please don't look at it for so long because your conscious expression is putting too much light in the hive and we like it to be darker. So where we put our conscious expression is also where we put our light. And water is a container of photonic light. And if water was the holy grail, its contents would be light. Its contents would be light. And so this really started to put some things together for me as to how water is receiving information and sharing information through the medium of light. Just as I'm starting to, water starting to freeze, but before it's completely frozen in the whole dish, it sends these little shoots out. And I photographed that at the end of those shoots is what looks like a halo of light that you can both see and film. But you have to get it just the right time. I think it is light that's paving the way for the design of the images. Now, with spirit, when I've interviewed many people that have had near-death experiences, and many of them have the sense of rising. Now, what rises that's related to water? A vapor or a gas. And as a gas rises, it expands, which is very much like what happens to the expression of consciousness as the spirit might leave the body, according to many people that have had out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences. Practically anyone who believes that they have a spirit or a soul or a subtle body will tell you that it leaves the body upon death. But no one tells you how. The most logical way that I can see is that the spirit of water, if we want to give it a name, is in relationship, or the conscious aspect of who we are. Just as a side note, a friend of mine, Moses Hackman, has this nice saying. He says that water is the glove on the hand of consciousness. See, I don't know if water is conscious or not. A lot of people slap that around and go, oh yeah, water is conscious. Well, I don't know that we know. There's lots of things we actually don't know. But from what I've seen is that water and consciousness are so intimately intertwined that they seem to behave as one. The more you study in these more esoteric fields. So these people that have had near-death experiences, some of them, not all, but many, have an feeling of rising and then looking down upon their body and not recognizing it to be their body, but observing. I think that one, and I think there are many more, but one of these most spiritual aspects of water is the observer. They have become the observer. They are also the observer of all around them. Their expression of awareness has expanded significantly because they are not contained within the realms of the physical anymore. Here's something really interesting, because my question is also, what is it that sees? What is it that is seeing through these lenses, through this imagination, through this body? There was a study done on people who were born blind. People who are born blind, when they dream in the way they experience the world. So they don't dream in pictures, they dream in senses and feelings and smells and and things like that. People that were born blind later dream in pictures like we do. So there was a study done on, I can't remember if it was 17 or 21 people who were born blind, who had had verifiable near-death experiences. And what was fascinating is that those verified cases where they had either died in hospital and the doctors had been able to verify it, or their families were there, or whatever it was, those people who were born blind, never seen the world, never dreamt in pictures, had a near-death experience, came back and told everyone what they saw, what the room looked like, what the people looked like in the room. They were able to say everything of what they witnessed. And they even then went on, even though they came back into a body that was blind, they went on to dream in pictures. So what is it that sees? And I think that this concept of water in one of its multiple stages is the witness. So we have two worlds, the one we live in and the one we live on. The one we live in is the way we experience the world. Images come in through the eyes, sounds come in through the ears, taste comes in through the mouth, touch comes in through the fingers or the body. Everything is experienced, thoughts, emotions within this world we have as a body. So what do we experience outside of the body? Well, one of the things that all of us can experience outside of the body at some point in our life is to be the observer. People can do this through meditation, through psychedelic experiences. My son broke his wrist skateboarding last year or the year before, and we had to rush him to hospital because it was pretty bad. And the doctor said he was going to be on ketamine, so Rama would be here but not exactly here. And so that definitely is what happened. Rama was here but not here. But after the whole experience and after his harm was set, I asked him, what, and that is a drug that really puts you in a very unusual state. But he said he was watching himself being operated on. He was watching from the corner of the room and he could see me. He was aware of that and he could see himself. And then he went into some wormholes and had some other experiences, but kept coming back to watching himself. So this observer is something that where we're able to kind of come outside of ourselves and come back in. And it comes into a very big question of like, who are you? Who are we? And it comes into, if you pardon the pun, you boil it down, we're water, salts, minerals, and consciousness. Even if you're cremated, obviously the water will evaporate, but the ashes are actually salts. The salts go back to the earth, the water goes back up. My friend Moses Hackman, he also says that the cycle of water is the cycle of the soul. And when you look at what we're made up of, water, which doesn't die, it is only in one of its states, and is never afraid to go from one state to another state. In fact, it's well aware of it. I can explain that more in the next talk. But there is no fear in the transition of one stage to another. And within that, you then look at salt. Salt's a shapeshifter as well. It can become invisible, just like water can when it evaporates. When you put salt into water, it disappears, but it gives a quality to the water that's electrical. It is also a crystal that kind of loses its bonds. But when that water's evaporated, oh, hello, here's the salt again. And even when someone's cremated, those salts remain. We're made of these immortal substances. And then consciousness, try getting science to figure that one out. It's still there, still working on that. So this is these aspects where I think that it is the electrical charge that is holding the spirit to our field. So I say that because we have electrical charge that can be measured. It's not woo-woo. And the water in the air, just the fact that we breathe out means there's water in the air. We just can't see it. But it's attracted to that electrical charge. And if you kind of want to give an analogy, it would look like a huge three-dimensional spider web with dew all over it. And you imagine that you have this web this liquid antenna all around us that is picking up information in the air and bringing that information back into our intuition. And intuition is a very, very real thing, and it can be forewarning as well. And the way it can be forewarning is that that information is traveling from who knows how far into us. And so we receive that information as a feeling quite often, which is why when we go to a house that's had something weird going on and we go, oh, I don't know, this feels super heavy. I don't know. I don't like how this feels. That's not just your intuition, which is just this thing we think about. That's the water sharing information with the intuition. And the water is also the intuition. It's water speaking to water.
Mm.
So these are just little factors. But I think when the soul leaves, and I don't have all of these answers, but to me it makes the most sense that it leaves as a type of gas or vapor. And if you consider that there are over 300 different types of ice, and the secrets are all in the subtleties, each one of stage of that ice has its own information, and that we know we only know of 4 stages of water so far: a liquid, solid, gas, and a gel or plasma, the 4th phase of water. If you look up Dr. Gerald Pollack, also Dr. Marcel Vogel was a genius and talked about this stage before Jerry Pollack. We're all working together, so it's not a competition. And also other people had talked about 4th phase water prior to Jerry as well. So we all acknowledge these people. But but I was just on a podcast with Robert Edward Grant, and he agrees that mathematically there must be, because I've always said there's got to be more stages to water than we just don't know what they are yet. He agrees mathematically there have to be. There have to be more stages of water. And I think spirit conscious expression is in a direct relationship with a vibrational state of water we may or may not discover in the next 100 years. I hope we do, but I do believe it's a real thing. And that is how we can observe ourselves also in the dream time, which I can talk about in the next one. I've done studies on dreams because I'm trying to find out, is water conscious, or is my consciousness impacting the water? When is it that I am not actively conscious? So what happens if I do the work that I do in the dream time, which I've done, and I've seen that in the dream time, the imagery that comes through is even clearer than the images in the waking state. So what does that mean? Of which we can get into in the class as well.
Veda, I feel everyone's commenting how your knowledge is just blowing our minds. And even for me, even though we talked yesterday, I'm just like, it's just so incredible. And I think also something I've felt, and I always feel when I hear you talk, is really a bodily resonance. And I don't know if it's maybe the water in me that's resonating to these facts, but it's so strong. And it gets me also quite emotional with the stories. And I find your work just incredible. And I love how you, as I said before, you take it with curiosity. I mean, we don't have that much time, but I know that in the class you will share more of your wisdom, and that you will share the technique, which I'm super excited about. Some people asked if you have a book, and I said yes, that it's coming soon. I don't know if you want to add something about that.
It's been a complete labor of love. I had a book called The Secret Intelligence of Water years ago that actually I didn't know anything about publishers, and I had a publisher. He went bankrupt, and so 1,000 books were made and sold, and that was it. And they've never come out again. So I took things into my own hands, and I've put this book together, which is a quantum leap, honestly, from that book. I've put so much attention into quality of photos and all the rest of it, and it's called The Living Language of Water. and it will be available in about 3 weeks at the end of June. And it looks like this. And this picture, which is beautiful, um, was after using music. And there's a huge music section in it. Using all different genres of music,
Mm.
because Emoto's work just sort of showed classical music and it versed heavy metal. And I don't want that, because my son came to me and he said, "I think water hates me, Mum," after he'd seen that. And I said, "What? My baby thinks water hates him? Why?" And he said, "Because I don't like classical music." And he says, "I don't really like heavy metal either, but I like Tupac, and Tupac swears, therefore I think water hates me, because according to this, water doesn't like swearing and doesn't like that." And so sometimes we have to be a little careful with these extreme contrasts, because that doesn't explain who we are. We're very well rounded. Some people might love this and love this, but it's not. Water has never been in judgment, and I said that to my son. Yes, there's lots of all those frequencies that somebody just said are in the book. I've done lots of
Mm.
frequency stuff. I've done homeopathy work. I've done thoughts and sounds and music and vibration and words and media, how water responds to different movies. And I have a chapter on water and God, water and spirit, the indigenous wisdoms, water and science. Like there's a lot in there. I've covered a lot of territory, even bodily fluids, tears, saliva, blood, urine. You can use my technique to really see the patterns of your own urine. It tells you so much about your state of health. So there's a lot in there, but I was going somewhere prior to going with all of that. But essentially, yeah, the book itself will be available, and we we're not going through Amazon. Like, I'm not going
Mm.
through these big companies. I do want people to know that too. We're going with in America. We're using a print on demand, smaller company that, and
Mm.
going. So it's much more in alignment. In New Zealand, I paid and got all the printed books in New Zealand and Australia, and we're doing the same thing in the UK and Europe. So you're not going to find it on Amazon unless someone's selling it on there. That's not me. And I think that some people might appreciate that, but I really want to
Definitely.
let people know about that too.
Yeah. That's so kind of you. And yay, I can't wait for the book and for the class now to listen to you. Will we find it on the website? I mean, if someone has, we don't have
Yeah.
a lot of time, but if someone has specific question for Veda regarding water, if you have questions about her book or the course, we will send an email with the discount code so you can join the course and join Veda's class on the 25th of June, which is around the time your book comes out, if I'm not wrong, end of
Yeah,
June.
it's
So
exactly. So,
great
yeah,
timing.
people will be
uh,
able to get on my website, and I'll be sharing about it on social media. But
Amazing. So someone asked Veda, what's your favorite thing you've learned from water or about water, it says here?
I think one of my favorite things is that I feel like I always have a friend. And because, when I'm working in the kitchen and doing this work as often as I do, from the times when I've been really, really sad, where I have been, because, we all have this range of emotions, and there are times that I've been really sad. And one of a beautiful story was that I was missing my mum. My mum was my best friend. She was really a walking angel to me, always was. And she died in 1999, and I was missing her. And I said to the water, I've got no reason why not to ask questions. I know this sounds crazy to some people, but you got to see the work to appreciate it. And I said to the water, can you please connect to my mum? And mum and I had a lifetime of memories that could have been anything that water designed. But to put into context, I used to live in Japan, and my mum and I would write letters to each other. This was before cell phones and computers. I sound prehistoric. And so at the end of every letter, my mum would make an attempt at drawing a circle, and her circles were so bad, and they often looked like the map of Australia. And then she'd do a little heart in the middle. And that was her little signature sign off. And I have a stack of letters from mum that had a misshapen circle with a heart in the middle. And so when the image came out, it was a misshapen circle with a heart in the middle. And now every year on her birthday, I ask water to connect to mum and I get the same result. But this year, I asked a slightly different question because my sister had been missing her too. And so I said, can you connect mum to my sister and to me? And this year, I got 2 misshapen circles with a heart in each one. So I think that's been very special. And why I say friend is that when I'm very sad, even if I'm putting flowers in water and doing some so separate thing, water won't show me any of that. Water will just show me sad faces because it knows how I feel.
That's so sweet. I didn't get around to it, but one of the things I wrote down was that I felt this tenderness that you have with water as if it's like your friend and companion, and I love that. And I love the pragmaticism that there is also in your work and the way you talk about it. It's really like lived experiences, and I think that's what makes me resonate so much. And everyone has incredible comments in the chat, which I can share with you later. But it was such a beautiful experience to listen to you. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for listening and being so beautifully present. I'm really grateful. And we'll send the information about the webinar and the discount for the Wisdoms of Water, where there's really amazing teachers coming in. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Sorry we didn't get to share pictures, but there's lots of stuff on my website to see so you can get a visual.
Thank you so much, everyone.
See you, everyone.
Ciao.